Thank you, Rabbi, and welcome everyone. I am going to change the subject to focus on the month of Sivan, which starts tomorrow. Today is the 44th day of the Omer, so it has been 44 days since the first day of Pesach and our second Seder. The Torah teaches that the first day of the third month after the Exodus, that is Rosh Hodesh Sivan, marks the day when our ancestors arrived within sight of Mount Sinai. On Rosh Hodesh Sivan in ancient Israel, our ancestors would have finished harvesting the barley crop and be preparing to harvest wheat and to bring the first fruits of that harvest to the temple in Jerusalem. The Torah commandment for Shavuot is about the agricultural aspect of the season and not on commemorating giving the Torah. Exodus 34:19 says, "You shall observe the festival of weeks with the first offering of the wheat harvest." It was only centuries later, during the time of Roman domination and conquest, that the rabbis decreed that Shavuot be observed as Zaman Matan Toratenu, the time when the Torah was given to us. I must say, Dan and I also have agriculture on our minds this time of year. Our vegetable garden gets a lot of attention, though we work on it most of the year. In March or April, we break up the soil and put up the fencing that will protect the garden from all the various creatures who live in our yard and would love to lunch there. There are several rounds of planting, from the always futile St. Patrick's Day planting to the tomato plants that we set out at the end of May. We worry over things like Sunday's bizarre snowstorm, and we water the garden most days when it's not pouring rain. I regularly weed and stake and tie up the tomatoes and the cucumber vines, and we bring in the produce as available and needed, although sometimes crops are an utter bust. Last year, the tomato crop was a complete failure. As we harvest the last crops, we start to clean out the beds. In late autumn, we take down the fencing, mulch the beds. I'm tempted by seed catalogs during those cold winter months, and then in March, the cycle starts again. Because of our vegetable garden and our abiding interest and work in the law and justice, the two themes of Shavuot are top of mind in our home almost all the time. But I only recently started thinking about the close connection between agriculture and the giving of the Torah. The Torah itself is filled with commandments concerning agriculture. These include the mitzvah of refraining from gleaning the corners of the fields, not hitching two different species of animal to pull the same plow, and two of the mitzvot in Parashah Bachar, from which we read last Shabbat, letting the land rest every seventh year and allowing the land to return to its original owners in the Jubilee year, which, as you know, is the year corresponds in the way to the counting of the Omer. It's 7 sets of 7 plus 1, 50 years. Each of these mitzvot contains a powerful moral teaching. Also, the Shema and its connected blessings remind us of that strong connection between agriculture and Torah. The V'ahavta reminds us to have the words of the Torah always in mind. You know the words. And right after the V'ahavta, we read this: "If you will earnestly heed the mitzvot I give you this day, to love Adonai your God and to serve God with all your heart and all your soul, then I will favor the land with rain at the proper season, in autumn and spring, and you will have an ample harvest of grain, wine, and oil. I will assure abundance in the field for your cattle. You will eat to contentment." I think, though, that there's even another link between agriculture and the Torah. And that is really the notion of constant attention and cultivation. Just as there is no harvest without the gardener's steady attention throughout almost the entire year, there is no yield from the law without action. It's not enough to receive Torah. We also have to do Torah. And doing Torah, I would argue, is not limited to doing what the law requires and refraining from that which is forbidden. As rabbis and scholars have done for centuries, we need to study, and to think about how the law applies to particular situations. With regard to the laws governing our country, I'd say there's even an additional step, and that is to be ready to advocate for interpretations or changes that respond to changed conditions. Growing food and doing Torah both express an active partnership between us and God. In the words of Rabbi Emanuel Goldsmith, the idea of Torah as law should also remind us that moral responsibility, which is mediated through conscience, is the principal manifestation of God in human experience. I suppose as well, the miracle of the crops that appear in our garden with effort, with good luck, with God's blessing, is also a manifestation of God in human experience. As we pause to honor Rosh Hodesh Sivan, I wish all of us the strength to cultivate our gardens and enjoy its produce, and actively to learn Torah and to practice its teachings.